One reason why Christians should not vote for DJT in this upcoming election is our Supreme Court. Hey, TikTok, Angela Parker, aka Boozy Bible Scholar. This is Scripture Through Womanist Eyes. And in this series, I do my eyeshadow and I think through a particular text. Today's text is Luke chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. And we will think through that text, the parable of the widow and the judge, specifically the corrupt judge. And we will think about that text as I put together this eye look using my Natasha Denona Roxa palette. It is this beautiful purple palette, and we will think about our Supreme Court today. Our Supreme Court, which has overturned Roe v. Wade, has granted presidential immunity, and has also made being unhoused criminal. Should Christians today uphold those types of rulings? And if you vote for Donald J. Trump, he will add more justices who uphold those types of rulings. These seem antithetical to the gospel of Jesus Christ. So, in Scripture Through Womanist Eyes, we'll look at Luke 18 and put together this eye look. I look forward to doing that with you today. So I'm thinking about the Supreme Court and why I would not vote for Donald Trump and the reason why others should not vote for Donald Trump. So the only thing that lessens the infamy of Trump's Supreme Court legacy, at least in the sense that he can and should be blamed for it, is that the reconstruction of the court is not strictly speaking his idea. You have to realize that, and I did not realize this until I was teaching in Seattle. One of my students, a conservative student, said to me, Dr. Parker, no matter how much you talk about what's right or valued in the Christian imagination and the Christian identity, the whole idea behind conservative Christianity is the court. It's all about the Supreme Court and the reconstruction of the court. And so when my student said that, I realized that for conservative Christians, it was the person behind who was making the Supreme Court. And that is the person of Leonard Leo. Leonard Leo is the person at the top of the Federalist Society who's always been the one shortlisting the people behind the Supreme Court. And so he's been giving the names, the conservative names, to the movement behind the Supreme Court. So he's the person who gutted Roe v. Wade, who gave the names to the people, for the Supreme Court. The Chevron deal that was the hammer blow to the liberal governance of the ways that we do business in the Supreme, or the ways that we think about how government agencies work in the United States of America. How Chief Justice Roberts has now ruled this idea about presidential immunity. And I think what's even more important in our Scripture Through Womanist Eyes today, this idea that being unhoused is criminalized, how being unhoused is criminalized. So we'll look at Luke 18 and have a conversation about being unhoused being criminalized. Wayne Goss, number 3. I'm using my Natasha Denona Roxa palette. So let me at least ground us in the scripture. I did a lot of setup. I'm going into velour. Luke 18, 1 through 5. Then Jesus told them a parable. And he says, in a certain city, there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. And in that city, there was a widow who kept coming to him saying, grant me justice against my opponent. For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice so that she may not wear me out by continually coming. And then the Lord said to the people, God will grant justice to his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night. Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith in the earth? And so I want to focus on the word grant justice, which is ekdikeo, ekdikeo. And so I'm going to deepen our outer corner as I think about ekdikeo. So Luke uses ekdikeo twice, and I'm going into jacaranda, this deep purple, into my outer corner. And so ekdikeo is translated in the NRSV as grant justice to. And this one word needs 3 words in order to get the connotation or the translation. Now, grant justice to is a Bauer, Danker, Arendt, Gingrich translation. And when I say those 4 names, those are old German men who are deceased now, but that is a traditional Christian translation. And when I research this word, there are other lexicons that give us a broader definition of this word. So this widow is going to this judge who has no respect of people or of God. And when you look at the Little Scott lexicon, Little Scott, when I teach Greek, I tell students you can't just rely on the Bauer. The BDAG is our acronym for it. The BDAG is the traditional Christian one. You have to look outside of the Christian lexicon and look at other lexicons to get an idea as to how it's used outside of Christianity. And ekdikeo has a connotation of not just grant justice to, but to avenge, to vindicate a person, to take up a cause for someone else, to actually act in a justice way on behalf of someone. And that's a slightly different connotation because it's this idea that you're going to act on someone else's behalf because it's the right thing to do. It's not just you're granting justice because you can, but you're acting on someone else's behalf because it's the right thing to do. And this ekdikeo verb does not appear often in our Greek New Testament. Luke uses it here in this particular verse because this widow is specifically asking for it of this judge. So remember, in our Hebrew Bible and in our New Testament, we are supposed to work on behalf of widows, orphans, and foreigners. Widows, orphans, and foreigners. And judges are supposed to take action on behalf of widows, orphans, and foreigners. And Jesus followers, especially in Acts of the Apostles, are supposed to take care of widows, orphans, and foreigners. But what does it look like when the judges and the courts do not take care of widows, orphans, and foreigners? I would argue that we get a Supreme Court like the one that we have in place today that actually criminalizes being unhoused. So remembering that Jesus in Palestine, when he's ministering, ministered to the aklas, which would be the crowds. And I'm taking my Tom Ford number 3 and I'm going into Bolt. It's the middle shade that is this new marble shade from Natasha Denona. And so I know as soon as I now swirl into it, it's going to not be as pretty. But Jesus ministered to the 75-80% who are the crowds, the destitute, the unhoused, the lame, those folks who are on the underside of society. And the Supreme Court ruled in June 28th, 2024, that cities can punish unhoused people for sleeping in public, even when there is no shelter available. The 6-3 ruling upheld the law in Grants Pass, Oregon, that criminalized sleeping outside in public. The ruling determined that the Eighth Amendment's cruel and unusual punishment clause does not prohibit cities from punishing unhoused people. The court held that punishing someone for sleeping in public does not violate that rule. The ruling suggests a return to the poorhouses of the early 20th century, which tried to solve poverty by punishing it. So we're going back to a time, and I think I'm going to go into Flutter and see what it does. Or maybe I'll go into Stargirl in my inner corner. So I'm turning the brush over and I'm going into Stargirl. That instead of fining people, they would fine people, ticket people, arrest people. The ruling has been criticized by liberals, by progressive people, as the beginning of the criminalization of homelessness. And it's undermining other ways, or really beginning to back other ways that we can criminalize other elements of poverty in United States society. Okay, Stargirl. Stargirl is doing the most in my inner corner. So we went from Bolt to Stargirl. And as always, I'm going to have to go in and clean everything up. So we're going to have to clean up our ways of thinking about how we criminalize people in society, even after we don't take care of people in society the way that Jesus would take care of people in society. And this is why our Supreme Court needs to be overhauled. And if we elect Donald Trump, he would just add even more extreme justices, like the justice in Luke 18, who has no fear of God and no respect of anyone. So here is the final look, TikTok. This is Scripture Through Womanist Eyes. We were thinking about the Supreme Court justices. This is my eye look with the Natasha Denona Roxa palette. And as always, friends, I am reminding you to be bold, be brave, and be brilliant as we head into these last days of the 2024 election cycle. I do hope you get out there and vote.
Hey friends, Editing Angela here. My apologies, but I lost audio for the last bit of the clip. So I will just end by saying be bold, be brave, be brilliant, and in these last days of the election, just be anxious for nothing and hold on till these last days. See you soon.